Hey photographers, this is the Fuji X-T3, and Sonam and I have come to Toronto Island today to put it through its paces. Now, I'm not sure whether the X-T3 is an upgrade to the X-T2 or the X-H1. It has features that are going to make owners of both of those cameras envious. Now, the X-T3 conforms to my mental image of what a camera should look like. The silver accents on the magnesium alloy body give it a sense of style that I like, and the physical controls give it a usability. It feels comfortable and it looks familiar. Inside is Fuji's 4th generation X-Trans sensor, APS-C sized, with a 26 megapixel resolution, and a new processor to match. That delivers speed improvements across the board. Shooting Ilian pipes at burdock under terrible lighting conditions, I was very impressed, not only by the speed and accuracy of the focus system, but also by the face and eye detection, which worked well even when shooting profiles. The X-T3 has some features I've not seen elsewhere, and this review is based on firmware 1.01. Fuji has promised more features in firmware updates before the end of 2018. Because there's lots to cover, this is a fairly long video. Use the menu in the description below to skip to the parts that are of interest to you. New is a Sportsfinder mode, which introduces a 1.25 crop and takes 16 megapixel images, but provides a viewfinder mode that extends beyond the frame, so you can see subjects just before they enter the image. And a 30 frame burst mode, also with a 1.25 crop, but that's not compatible with sports mode. A new monochrome tone adjustment capability, 19 steps from warm to cool, adds to Fuji's already best-in-class mono capabilities, and these settings can be applied to both acros and standard mono. A new digital microprism manual focus assist mode. It's interesting in a retro kind of way. Fuji continues to provide more manual focus assist options than the competition. And there's pre-shot, which starts recording images when the shutter is soft pressed. I'll get to the video details in a moment, but let me start by saying H.265, Cinema 4K, 60 frames, 10-bit, 400 megabit data rate. And that's an improvement over both the X-T2 and the X-H1, and it gives Fuji a significant lead in video. At the point that I'm recording this video, Fuji is best in class. One thing Fuji did not add is in-body stabilization. They do have some very fast lenses though, and in-camera stabilization isn't much of an assist for video anyway. So with Sonam's help, let's take a closer look at sports, pre-shot, burst and focus using the XF 15-140 lens. So first, switch to CH, fast burst, turn on Sportsfinder mode. Now, it turns out that Sportsfinder is not compatible with electronic shutter, so the maximum burst is 11 frames. And image size is now set to a special version of M 16.6 megapixels. Continuous autofocus with wide tracking, an AFC4 for a suddenly appearing subject, shutter 1000, aperture f2.8. As I walk across the screen, the focus seemed to lose me, but the images are all in focus. Let's switch off sports and turn on the electronic shutter and pre-shot, which saves the last few images before the shutter is fully pressed. So this time Sonam soft pressed and clicked the shutter when my feet left the ground, and we got about 10 frames before takeoff. So depending on the scene, both are useful. The X-T3 is mirrorless, and if you were looking for a mirrorless model to be small and light, you'd be best to try another model like the X-T20. The X-T3 with battery and memory cards weighs in at 540 grams. It is both elegant and functional, making it both attractive and easy to use. The size gives it a look and feel that says serious camera. The abundant physical exposure controls, dials for shutter, ISO and EV, a lens ring for aperture, a meter collar complete the picture. Along with one of the best viewfinders, it's crisp and clear and very responsive. The diopter has sufficient range to allow me to shoot without my glasses. And I like the large dial. Pull it out to set and press it back in to lock in position. The grip is slightly less than I'd like, but I can hold the X-T3 comfortably with the thumb rest on the back. And there are also front and back control dials, which can be clicked for additional functionality. The LCD swivels up and down and release the latch and it rotates sideways for portrait mode shooting. The only thing it doesn't do is swivel front for selfies. Otherwise, this would be an ideal vlogging camera. But it is a touchscreen with settings to tap and snap, set focus, or select the focus area. And a joystick, both to set the focus point and navigate menus. Even with touch, this is my preferred focus selector. The ports on the left side are behind a removable door, a nice touch for video shooters mounting the X-T3 on a rig. Fuji included an HDMI clip with the X-H1, but not here. I'm using my Tether Tools jerk stopper. Videographers will also appreciate mic in and headphone out connectors. The remote control port is hidden behind a small door on the right side. 2 card slots on the right, both supporting UHS-2, and you'll want the fast UHS-2 cards to take advantage of the burst speed and the video data rates included here. A variety of customizable buttons, including the stealth button on the front side. The customization screen will help you find the buttons and set your preferred functions for each. This kit includes the Fuji 18-55 lens, which ramps from f2.8 to 4. In my opinion, this is a better than average kit lens. As soon as you turn it on, the X-T3 wants to be connected to a smartphone. I obliged by pressing pairing registration in the free app. Once paired, that triggers the camera to sync the date and the time. Use smartphone sync setting to add location. One interesting thing on the X-H1, and I expect the X-T3 to be similar, is that the app alerts me to new firmware, and the entire upgrade process is done between the phone and the camera. Nice improvement. The X-T3 can be set to automatically transfer images to your smartphone. This tags the images to be transferred, and then when you turn the camera off, it reminds you to change the Wi-Fi on the phone to the camera's ad hoc network. Then the images are transferred so you can share them with friends and post them to social media. That's a setting you can also disable in the app. The battery rating has improved about 15% over the X-T2 using the same 126S battery. And there's a boost mode. By default, it's activated with the bottom button on the control circle. The big thing you'll notice is that with boost off, the display slows after a few seconds. A soft press on the shutter button restores the normal frame rate. There's a new battery grip to match the X-T3, and although it wasn't available for this review, it's not as necessary as it once was, as there are no operational changes, as there were with the X-T2. Focus mode is controlled by a switch on the front, single, continuous, and manual. Touch focus works in manual mode. In continuous mode, hold your finger on the screen to burst. In video mode, touch starts, but doesn't stop recording. The screen also supports 4 custom swipe modes for quick access when you run out of customizable buttons. Now, I was able to make swipe motions work more consistently on the X-T3, but that meant I was often accidentally switching into sports mode even when I just intended to change the focus mode. I set that motion to none. Also note that the default swipe up is histogram, which includes an RGB display. And is this a good time to whine that the touch functions here are all overruled by the button dial settings, screen 3 settings? And that's where you'll find the touchpad area settings to select focus area while shooting with the viewfinder. I use the right side to keep my nose out of it. But why aren't these focus options with the rest? Let's start by setting autofocus mode to all. Then press the joystick and use the front or back dial to cycle through the area options: wide, 3 sizes of zone, 6 sizes of single. That's easier than using the menu. Single can be positioned on a 25 horizontal by 17 vertical grid, 425 points that come within millimeters of covering the entire screen. Use the joystick or touch to select a point. Even small points at the edges focus accurately and quickly, and if 425 seems a bit much, the menu can reduce the grid to a 9 by 1317 points. Face and eye detection feels completely re-engineered. It quickly picks up a face and detects an eye, even if the subject isn't facing the camera. And Continuous has 5 preset configurations and a 6th, where the parameters, for tracking, how long it waits to change, for speed, how quickly it changes, and zone area, in addition to auto, center, which covers the center area of the image, and front, which concentrates on the subject closest to the camera. I took out my train set to test that. Now, we're in autofocus continuous, and if you want to follow an object, single and zone don't. Only wide tracking does that, and only 117 points are available. And there's no explicit way to select an object to track. Let's use Mode 1, Multi-Purpose. Now, as long as I set the focus point where the locomotive enters the scene, it picks up the train and follows it along. So let's shoot some 11-frame burst. The train is generally in focus, as you can see from the background, which gets progressively softer. But going by the number on the front of the engine, there are a few misses. Switch to manual focus and a distance meter appears on screen. The blue area indicates the depth of field for the current aperture. Manual focus includes 3 assist modes. Press the back dial to see an expanded view. Turn to change the magnification. Use the joystick to move the area. In the menu, turn on Focus Check. Then the X-T3 switches to expanded view as soon as the focus ring is adjusted. That's a setting I use. In stills mode with manual focus, press the Disc button to change to a dual window view focus assist. This is available in the viewfinder and on the LCD. Screen setting dual display enables you to switch the expanded view and the whole scene. Another cool Fuji feature, rotate the screen for portrait shooting, and the display rotates too. A long press of the back button to switch to digital split image, useful if the scene has vertical lines, again for a digital microprism, and for peaking. Set peaking using the menu, where color and sensitivity can be selected. For back focus, the AFL button will activate autofocus even in manual mode, but I use the button dial settings to customize it to AF on. You can also customize the button dial setting for shutter AF with settings for single and continuous mode. For back focus shooting, I'm usually single off and continuous on. Instant AF governs whether the AF button activates single or continuous focus, but after customizing continuous to the shutter, I don't need this. Other focus options include AF plus MF, which allows manual adjustments in autofocus mode, interlock of focus with exposure, on by default. It's easy to miss the focus bracket feature. It's hidden in the drive settings. First, choose it as a bracket option, and then use Focus Bracket to select the settings. It can take up to 1000-1 images with a focus change that varies from 1 to 10 undefined units, and an inter-image interval of up to 10 seconds. With 0, it takes the images continuously. Set the drive dial to bracket and snap. There's a bit of trial and error to get the right settings for a scene, and although there's no in-camera focus stacking option, that's easily done in Photoshop. And let's do a quick focus check for video. First, video options are independent of stills. On the video menu, which is the default when the camera's in video mode, the video focus area is selected. There's only one size, and it's a 7x13 91-point grid. In video mode, only continuous and manual are available, and the menu output to the HDMI recorder is cropped, so you can't see the top of the screen. Sorry. In order to use the selected point, make sure Movie AF mode is on Area. Multi is a full auto mode, equivalent to Wide for stills. There are custom continuous settings, but not like stills. Here, you select the sensitivity from 5 levels, 5 stays locked on the subject, and an 11-step speed setting. With Quick and Fast, it refocused from Sonam as soon as I walked through, but with Locked On and Slow, it stayed with me as Sonam passed through the shot. There are independent video settings for face and eye detect. I'm impressed by how well those work. Manual assist options are reduced to 2 standard and peaking, with 4 colors and 2 response options. The focus check option works while recording, so you can punch in to check focus without affecting the recording. But the dual display option is not available in video mode. In manual focus mode, touch works, but when recording, touch works only in continuous. It works nicely for a smooth rack focus. Before we get to exposure, let's have a look at the shutter options as they affect the exposure settings. The X-T3 has 6 options. Each is explained with a help tip on the bottom of the screen. There's the standard mechanical shutter for shutter speeds up to 1/8000. You can see how it works with a 1-second exposure, physical front and back curtains. There's a fully silent electronic shutter, and there's electronic front curtain, which does have a mechanical sound component, but has a shorter blackout. Here's that on a 1-second exposure. There's combined, and then combined with electronic front up to 1/8000, and combined electronic front up to 1/32,000. I really like those tips at the bottom of the screen, and I'd be happy if Fuji would incorporate these for more settings and features in the menu. Particularly as in general, the menu does not explain why a dimmed option is unavailable. Note that for a fully silent shutter, you'll have to turn off the simulated shutter sound. In addition to volume settings, there are 3 sound effects. You'll have to adjust your exposure thinking when shooting with the X-T3, and I think that's a good thing. First, there's a physical meter setting using the collar under the shutter dial, one of my favorite things, as I can set the meter mode without a menu dive. Average, multi, center weighted, and spot. But remember, I already linked spot to the focus spot. The lock for shutter speed doesn't lock the meter collar. And note that if you want to see what mode you're in on screen, use the display custom settings to select photometry, and it appears bottom left. Also note that if face eye detect is on, the meter displays that, as it's a meter mode that overrides the others. In video, although face detect is displayed, when it's off, the meter mode doesn't appear. Now, forget about PASM and just think about what you want to adjust. The camera does the rest. Start by setting the dials to A, ISO on the left, shutter on the right, and the lens's aperture ring to A. In the bottom left, you'll see that's the equivalent of program mode. Use the lock buttons to keep ISO and shutter in place. Before adjusting exposure settings, decide if you want the screen to display the actual exposure, preview exposure, and white balance in manual mode, or not. A complementary display setting, Natural Live View, doesn't display some settings like film simulation when on, but does display advanced filters and black and white modes. Off does display film simulations, white balance, and other settings. Confused? Me too. As long as we're here, turn on Image Disp if you want to see the image after you've taken it. Any reason why they didn't spell out display here as they do for auto rotate below? When you want to adjust the aperture, move the switch and turn the ring on the lens. If you want to set the shutter, unlock and use the shutter dial. Adjust one, and the X-T3 sets the other accordingly. Then use the exposure compensation dial to adjust as needed. 3 stops up and down, or set it to the C position and use the front dial for 5 up and down. Or set both aperture and shutter and let the ISO manage the overall exposure. Note that with the physical shutter dial with 1-stop increments, you might not have the granularity you'd like. The back dial control offers the 1/3 steps up and down to the next stop. So from 125 that's down to 80 and up to 200. Set the dial to T and use the back dial exclusively, with settings from 15 seconds to 1/8000 with the mechanical shutter, 1/32,000 with the electronic. Or B, bulb settings, up to 60 minutes with the mechanical shutter. Incidentally, if the exposure display number seems small, try the Large Indicators mode available for both LCD and viewfinder, and there's a customization screen to select which settings are displayed. ISO ranges from 160 to 12,800. The H and L positions on the ISO dial can be set from the button dial settings. H is 25.6 or 51.2, L 80, 100, or 125. And here's also where you find the ISO dial setting. I'm switching to Command, and I'll show you why I prefer that in a second. Back on the camera menu, there are 3 auto ISO settings, each with a default and a maximum, as well as a triggering shutter speed. And now, with the ISO dial on A, the front dial can select all the standard and extended ISO settings from 80 to 51.2, as well as the 3 auto ranges. Fuji's approach to ISO is a little more conservative than most. Many brands offer considerably higher values. However, even at the high settings, Fuji's images are clean, relatively low grain, and free of color shifts. The included EF-X8 flash has a guide number of 8, and there's an extensive flash control menu. The dynamic range settings are sometimes useful to manage high contrast scenes. Auto selects 100 or 200. The 400 setting is available with ISOs over 640. Screen right, you'll see the DR setting reduce as I lower the ISO. Alternately, and note that these are mutually exclusive, D-range priority can manage automatically or use the strong and weak settings. This setting also overrides the highlight and shadow adjustments you'll see in a minute. The X-T3 has 3 aspect ratios, including 1:1 for square images and 3 resolutions. There are also 2 JPEG quality settings, as well as RAW and combinations. With 2 memory cards, there are options to save sequentially. When one card is full, it switches to the other. Backup, which records to both, and RAW to one card, JPEG to the other. The only option for video is sequential, but you can choose which card to use first. Fuji's signature feature is their film simulations, standard, vivid, soft, and chrome, which are applied to JPEG images. There's also a menu option, Color Chrome, to deepen colors in shadows, and this works with both dynamic range settings, providing lots of opportunity to fine-tune challenging images. Other film simulations provide settings for negative, high, and standard, Eterna for video production, and 3 mono settings, Sepia, a standard black and white, and Acros, based on the analog film type. Both mono and Acros have 4 variants simulating color filters. For Acros and mono, a color tone provides 19 steps from warm amber to a cool blue. I've tried the grain setting, but never successfully. For grain, try a high ISO instead. White balance includes a basic set of presets, Kelvin from 2500 to 10,000, and 3 slots to capture and save custom settings. There's a white balance color adjustment panel. After setting the film simulation and selecting the white balance, further fine-tuning is possible with adjustments to the highlight and shadow tone. In color, 9 steps plus 4 to -4, and 9 steps of sharpness. Now, while they're useful, I'd like to have a little more range for these settings. It is worth noting that if you find that sometimes the X-Trans sensor is a little contrasty, setting the highlight and shadow to -2 will soften your images. I find that particularly useful for video, or make those adjustments in Lightroom. Most drive modes, like continuous high, are set using the collar under the ISO dial. Now, with continuous high, I selected continuous autofocus, sports mode, and 11 frames, the fastest supported by the mechanical shutter. Saving the medium JPEG set by sports mode, that captured 11 frames for 19 seconds before slowing to about 7 per second. With the electronic shutter, ES20 takes 20 full-frame JPEGs per second for 3 seconds before slowing to 9 per. Without a shutter sound, you can't tell when you've run out the buffer. An on-screen indicator would be very useful. Now, ES30 did not live up to its billing. With cropped JPEGs, it took 64 frames in the first 3 seconds, slowing to an average of 10 per second after that. And the buffer always clears in less than 10 seconds. I'll leave it to you to judge which is best for your needs. Now, I find the advanced filters a bit of a misnomer, and I'm not sure that they have a place on this camera. These are gimmicky effects that I rarely find useful. Well, I do kind of like the dynamic tone. And if you're shooting RAW, you've always got a file without the effect. And there's multi-exposure. Yeah, feel free to explore these on your own. Time-lapse, the intervalometer, isn't on the drive collar but in the menu. Now, there are extensive options for interval and an unlimited number of images. No video output setting, but that's easy to do in your video editor. And if you are shooting for video, set the aspect to 16:9. I don't know. Is panorama a drive mode? Pick size and direction and then pan in the direction shown on screen until you get the shot. Usually takes a few tries. With both cameras and lenses, Fuji is clearly making video a priority, and the improvements here should make everyone sit up and take notice. I'll provide an overview in the remainder of this video, but we'll also post a best video settings for the X-T3 with more details and a few hacks. In the menu, most of the video settings, those with the movie camera icon, are independent of their stills counterparts, so they will change when you switch the mode dial from stills to video. First up, both the current and popular H.264 and the new and improved HEVC high-efficiency video codec H.265 are supported. Both can output 422 10-bit to an HDMI recorder. H.265 can record 10-bit to an SD card. That, along with Fuji's Flog and MKX lenses, elevate the status of this camera to the head of the class. For H.265, there are 2 compression settings, a higher quality all-intra setting, best for editing and further processing, and a higher compression long GOP setting. These settings are not available for H.264. Now, I'm not sure that you'll see the difference. The all-intra saves more data per frame, while the long GOP, which stands for group of pictures, saves fewer distinct frames, recording only the incremental changes. Both of those settings, and as my default, I'm using H.265 and all-intra, support a variety of resolutions and frame rates, with some exclusions and limitations. Using all-intra, the 17:9 aspect DCI Cinema 4K resolution, 4096 by 2160, is supported at 24 and 29 frames in both drop and non-drop versions. Only 400 megabits data rate is available. And note that the amount of recording time available on my dual 64GB cards in the X-T3 for each of these settings is displayed lower right. Switch to long GOP to record up to 60 frames and with lower bit rates. The 4K 16:9 video aspect is supported at the same frame and data rates. HD 1080 is also supported with frame rates up to 60 and data rates up to 200 megabits. In H.264, the highest data rate is 200 megabits. The X-T3 has Zebra, an exposure guide preferred by video shooters. The level can be set from 50 to 100 in 5-step increments, and it conforms to a waveform reading, where 100 is the maximum legal broadcast video level. That's useful, but many also use 70% as a guide to properly exposing white skin. If you plan to use it, best to assign it to a custom button to make it easy to turn on and off. At DSC Labs, the XYLA chart's 21 rectangles reduce light by 1 stop each from left to right. With the lights off, exposing the leftmost chip to 100% Zebra, using standard settings, the X-T3 captures 8, maybe 9 stops above the noise floor. Eterna with 100 dynamic range is about the same, although the lower levels are slightly raised. Increasing the dynamic range to 400, again raising the lower levels, but now it's clearly 9 stops. With Flog there are 11, maybe 12 stops, and this is the quietest noise floor I've seen with any log settings. By the light of a single candle, the face detect is somewhat less reliable. Then, using the Eternifilm simulation and an ISO of 25.6 with a custom white balance, the results provide the right mood for this scene. There are a variety of output variations between SD and HDMI recordings, including 4K to both. I'm using an Adamus Ninja Inferno to record these screens and to check the output of the various options. With HDMI output display off, changing the movie mode setting also changes the output to conform with the selection. There are several nice things here. The LCD and the viewfinder work when an HDMI device is connected. Touch functions work, including movie silent mode, which I'll get to in a minute. Both zebra and peaking are displayed on the external device when it's in menu display mode. Recordings are limited to 30 minutes in all formats, one area where the competition offers better. And the files are saved in 4 GB chunks at 400 megabits. That means about 1 minute 20 seconds each. Not sure why Fuji engineers haven't enabled the larger file sizes possible with UHS-2 and SDXC. In video mode, if you want a smooth exposure transition, use Auto ISO, which transitions smoothly as I turn off the big light. With Auto Aperture, the X-T3 makes a step transition. While the X-T3 does show a rolling shutter effect, it's not as pronounced as most. The remote control app is useful and can be used to record video. Its major limitation is that the only video mode is HD, and there are no options to change it. Movie silent mode disables all of the physical controls. Use touch and the control pad to access and change the exposure and other settings. One of the advantages of using silent mode is that it simplifies switching between stills and video, as the video settings remain. This enables me to switch to stills, adjust the settings, and when I return to video, they're as I like them for video. Combined with the independent menu settings, this makes the X-T3 much more versatile for both. One minor aggravation, only because sometimes I want a less cluttered screen for recording. Once it's on, there's no simple way to turn the GPS on-screen indicator off. It's not one of the display options, and even turning Bluetooth and smartphone sync off doesn't disable it. Maybe I shouldn't be fussed about this, but every other screen icon has a control. When reviewing images, there are multiple display options to see all the EXIF and other details. And among other features, there's an extensive RAW conversion capability that includes film simulation and the ability to add the color chrome effect. You can copy images from one card to the other and record voice memos. Fuji's menu system is clear and reasonably well organized, with the exception of the Setup tab. And My Menu can be helpful to create a custom menu set for your frequently used options, but as there are many items that can't be placed on My Menu, and that includes most of the setup screens, is not as helpful as it could be. My operational complaint with the menu is that it resets, something that's particularly annoying when adjusting settings like the display customization. You try something, and when you return to make a further adjustment, you're back at the beginning. So it's nice that the menu sets to video when I'm in video mode, and it's nice that My Menu is the default when it's on, but starting back at the beginning doesn't feel helpful. So I'm imploring the Fuji engineers to please, let's have an option to return to the last used item. The X-T3 can be charged, but not powered with USB, and a one-piece battery charger is included, but the plug doesn't swivel closed. And there's more to come. Fuji has promised an upgrade with hybrid log gamma before the end of 2018. Now this is a hotly contested category, but for the moment, the Fuji X-T3 is the best APS-C camera on the market. shoot until your memory card is full and your battery is empty. I do read and reply to all relevant questions and civil comments, and if my content pleases you, it would please me to have you as a subscriber.